Well, hello. Today, I want to talk to you about the $99 Wonder Mic legend, the Rode PodMic. It's 2025, and this mic was released at the end of 2018. And when it came out, there weren't too many broadcast-style microphones floating around at this price point. It has definitely had an impact. I just did a search on B&H, and there were no fewer than 17 broadcast-style dynamic microphones for sale between $50 and $130. Now, this is my second PodMic, and I bought it specifically to do this review and to find out if I hadn't given my first PodMic a fair shake. So I have the PodMic mounted to the Rode DS2 stand, and I really love this style of stand as it allows me to move around a little bit and leaves room for my hands to gesticulate. The PodMic is connected directly to my SSL2 audio interface, and I have the gain set to about 8 out of 10. I'm seeing peaks around -6 dB in OBS, and that's a little warm, but it's kind of where I like it. In post, I will apply some additional level boost to bring the volume of the PodMic up to what YouTube expects, and I'll note the level boost on the screen right now. I'll also apply a limiter with -0.5 dB to protect against any clipping. I will not be applying any compression or EQ to this microphone for this recording. So this is what I would consider the raw sound of the Rode PodMic to be like. Before we move on, a quick rundown of the PodMic specs. It has a frequency response of 50 to 15,000 Hz, a 320 ohm impedance, and a quoted sensitivity of -57 dBV. Now, I will describe the sound of the PodMic as having a bit of a natural EQ smile. What I mean by that is I'm hearing a firm but tight bottom end, and a bit of a top end boost. The sound is a little in your face, and I don't think that was by accident. I feel like Rode made a decision to appeal to home content creators by making the PodMic sound very excited. It's not a mic sound I would expect to hear in a more expensive microphone, where a neutral sound is typically preferred by recording engineers. But it's also not a bad sound, and it's kind of hard not to like. It is worth noting that the famous Shure SM7B has an option for a presence boost, so I can't slag Rode for giving the PodMic a natural, excitable top end, even if there's no real way to disable it within the mic. So I don't think this mic sounds horrible on my voice, but it's not my first choice. And for what it's worth, I think I prefer my other Rode microphone, a NT USB Mini. It has a bit more of that rounded sound, and it just sounds better on my voice. Now, I think the PodMic might work better if my voice was deeper, or I had a little bit less of nasal resonance than I have, but, I'm working with what God gave me, y'all. If I use this mic for production, I would want to tame the top end a bit, and there's a couple ways to go about that, and I'll talk more about that later. Moving on to the build quality and features of the PodMic, I would like to say that the designer of this mic did an amazing job of making it look distinctive, without being tacky. And at this point, I think it's safe to say this microphone has had a huge impact on the industry. When you look at other dynamic mics, they often ape this kind of look. The PodMic does have a built-in shock mount, or so they claim, and it has a built-in pop filter encased in the grill here, and it does a decent job of handling plosives. It's also a very heavy microphone. It can get unstable at certain angles when used on the Rode stand. But that's the price you pay for a quality fill. And comparing it to other microphones, such as this Shure MV7, this thing costs like twice as much or more than this. And it's kind of chintzy. I mean, it's not the worst made thing I've ever, picked up, but for $240 or whatever I paid for this thing feels a lot better made. And before moving on, I would like to point out that the extra weight or mass of this microphone tends to tame the handling noise a bit. It's not too bad. And last but not least, the XLR jack on the back of the PodMic is very robust. It feels like it's part of the body. There's no wiggle or anything, and I really dig that. So let's talk about how the PodMic picks up sound. The Rode PodMic is a cardioid type microphone, and that means it picks up more sound from the front than it does from the side or the back. And I'll demonstrate this now by speaking into the mic from different axes. This is me speaking into the Rode PodMic from the side. This is me speaking into the Rode PodMic from the back. And this is me speaking into the Rode PodMic from the front. Now, I'd say the off-axis rejection of the PodMic is pretty darn good. And it's really helpful because it helps to minimize other noises from leaking into your recording. It also picks up less of the room echo and flutter than it would if it was an omnidirectional type mic. And that is so important because I feel that most home content creators won't be recording in perfect acoustical environments, just as I am not. Technical jibber jabber out of the way, let's compare the PodMic to what I consider to be the 10,000-pound gorilla of the podcast YouTube universe, the standard bearer of all dynamic microphones, the Shure SM7B. The SM7B costs 4 times as much as the PodMic, but does it deliver 4 times the performance? I will be using a FET head on my SM7B today to help minimize noise and get me a little more control over the gain on the audio interface. The text I will be reading from is Edgar Allan Poe's The House of Usher. Let's kick things off with the PodMic. Although as boys we had been together, I really knew little about my friend. I knew, however, that his family, a very old one, had long been famous for its understanding of all of the arts and for the many quiet acts of kindness to the poor. I had learned, too, that the family had never been a large one with many branches. The name had passed always from father to son, and when people spoke of the House of Usher, they included both the family and the family home. And now I'll record the same passage using the Shure SM7B with the flat setting enabled. Although as boys we had been together, I really knew little about my friend. I knew, however, that his family, a very old one, had long been famous for its understanding of all of the arts and for the many quiet acts of kindness to the poor. I had learned, too, that the family had never been a large one with many branches. The name had passed always from father to son, and when people spoke of the House of Usher, they included both the family and the family home. Now let's try the same passage using the SM7B with the presence boost enabled. Hopefully this will have a similar sonic signature to the Rode PodMic. Although as boys we had been together, I really knew little about my friend. I knew, however, that his family, an old one, had long been famous for its understanding of all of the arts and for many quiet acts of kindness to the poor. I had learned, too, that the family had never been a large one with many branches. The name had passed always from father to son, and when people spoke of the House of Usher, they included both the family and the family home. So do you hear a $400 difference in sound between this and the SM7B? Now, I do have a preference, and it is the SM7B, but to be honest, I don't think my preference is worth $400, and I wouldn't tell somebody to spend a limited amount of money in that way. And I don't hear anything wrong with the PodMic, fundamentally. I would like to smooth it out a little bit with some EQ and maybe a bigger pop filter, but more on that in a minute. Now let's test out the PodMic's internal pop filter with a Plosive Test. Peter Piper picked a pick of pickled peppers. Please pop the plentiful pickled peppers with purpose. Let's give this mic a hand by using an SM7B foam filter on it. Okay, now let's give the Plosive Test another go with the SM7B type foam filter on the front of the Rode PodMic. Peter Piper picked a pick of pickled peppers. Please pop the plentiful pickled peppers with purpose. And I'm just going to leave this pop filter on for the rest of the video because I really do like the way it sounds with this on the mic. So what do I think of the PodMic? Well, first, excellent build quality. Second, excellent value, especially used. I paid $50 for this one, plus about $9 to ship it. I mean, for $60 with a slight cosmetic imperfection, I think this thing is a steal. Third, the sound. I do prefer the sound of this mic with that extra pop filter. It smooths it out a little bit dynamically, and it does calm the top end down a smidge. I find it grating without this, and if I was going to record more with this, I would take an EQ and kind of calm the top end down a little bit with some kind of a shelf or something like that. But that's it. It doesn't need a lot of work for voice recording. And if you don't like the look of this filter, by the way, you could buy the dedicated Rode WS14 pop filter. I recommend you get black, but if you're a kid out there making a YouTube channel and you want the fun colors, Rode's got you. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, This mic did not have a lot of direct competition when it came out in 2018, but today there is a lot of competition. So let's talk about a couple of alternatives. Looking at better known names, you have the SC Electronics Dynacaster DCM3, super interesting dynamic mic at $99, although it does kind of look like a chopped down handheld mic in a housing. There's also the SC Electronics Dynacaster DCM6, which at the time of this video was the same price as the DCM3. And that microphone is even more interesting because it has a built-in cloud lifter. Really, it's kind of what it is. They call it a preamp, but basically it's just like sticking a cloud lifter on the back of a dynamic mic. You also have the Audio-Technica AT2040 hypercardioid type dynamic mic. Being a hypercardioid, it should be even better at rejecting room noise, but that classification is kind of subjective, so I'm not going to say that that's always the case. And you could consider a classic dynamic handheld microphone like the Shure SM57 or SM58. I prefer the 57 with the squarish pop filter added on the end because I never really cared for the clown nose style pop filter on the 58. I guess it's because I'm not a pop star. In closing, would I use this mic? Yeah, I would. Not my first choice, but I admit I do like it a little more than I thought, especially with this on it. I would set it up just like this too. I wouldn't change anything. I do like this DS2 stand. I do love the pop filter. Maybe I would use a different audio interface, and I might experiment with a cloud lifter or fathead to get me a little more control over the gain setting on my audio interface. I do think the mic benefits from a few extra dollars spent on sound treatments on your room, as this mic tends to pick up echo and flutter a little more than, say, an MV7 or a SM7B. Well, that's it for today's mic video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and if you have any questions, just put them down in the comments and we'll do our best to get back to you. Until next time, have fun, y'all.